first performance on stage was some scenes from Romeo and Juliet when I was 13. And I was truly, I must have been dreadful. I had no idea what I was doing.
At 78, Sally Field, one of Hollywood's most beloved stars, carries a story that is as inspiring as it is heartbreaking. Behind her radiant smile and unforgettable performances lies a lifetime of struggles, painful losses, and battles few ever saw coming. Once the darling of the silver screen, she now faces challenges that reveal the fragility of even the strongest spirits. But what really happened to her? How did she rise to fame? Join us as we uncover Sally Field's life, fame, and struggles that have defined her personality. Sally's struggles and resilience. Between 1973 and 1976, when Sally was in her late 20s, her life slipped into a heavy silence, one that was far more than simply being between jobs. It was the kind of silence that felt like suffocation, the silence of a soul in turmoil. She was turning down roles, not because she lacked offers, but because she could not bear the thought of playing yet another shallow, sugar-coated character created only to fit Hollywood's narrow mold. The industry that once welcomed her with open arms had quickly placed her in a box, typecasting her as the cheerful girl next door, stripping her of depth, and treating her early fame like a product to be consumed. In the process, Hollywood had left her adrift, unseen, and dangerously close to believing that maybe she had nothing real left to offer. Privately, she was unraveling. Sally wrestled with waves of depression and struggled with disordered eating. The bright, radiant spirit that had carried her into stardom seemed to dim, shrinking until she felt more like a ghost drifting through life than a woman still full of dreams. In later confessions, she admitted that she had even considered walking away from acting altogether, imagining a quieter life as a waitress, anything that might free her from the emptiness of being applauded for a version of herself she did not recognize. This was not a retreat to reflect or recharge. This was a woman teetering on the edge of surrender. And yet, in that dark abyss, something unexpected took root. A quiet, stubborn vow. She would not let Hollywood decide her fate. That decision bore fruit in 1979, when at the age of 33, Sally accepted a role that changed everything. In Norma Rae, she stepped into the life of a Southern textile worker who dares to stand up against injustice. What she brought to the screen was not just a character. It was a cry from the depths of her own battles. She gave audiences grit that felt unshakable and vulnerable, so raw it could not have come from a script alone. The film struck a powerful chord with both critics and viewers, and that same year she stood on the stage of the Academy Awards, holding her first Oscar for Best Actress.
I owe a lot to the cast, to my players, to Lindsay and John and Danny and Ed and Amy.
It was a victory carved out of years of quiet suffering and relentless determination, a declaration that she was more than the shallow roles Hollywood had once forced upon her. What made her triumph historic was not the golden statue itself, but the truth it represented. That real artistry, born out of real wounds, can move the soul. And the momentum did not fade. Just 5 years later, in 1984, at the age of 38, she rose to even greater heights. This time, she played a widowed mother in Places in the Heart, fighting to keep her farm alive during the harsh years of the Great Depression. It was a role that demanded not only talent, but emotional stamina that could not be faked. Determined to honor the story, Sally immersed herself in rural life, enduring its rhythms and hardships so she could carry them truthfully onto the screen. When Oscar night came again, and she held her second Best Actress award, her words, unplanned and straight from the heart, became unforgettable.
Norma Rae was a real gift to me. It was given to me by Laddie and Jay and Gareth, the old fox.
You like me. Right now. You like me. It was not just a thank you speech. It was a cry of relief, the distilled truth of a woman who had spent years fighting to be seen, heard, and respected. Her career only deepened from there. In 1989, she broke hearts as the grieving mother in Steel Magnolias. In 1993, she brought humor and layered humanity to her role as the strong yet tender ex-wife in Mrs. Doubtfire. And in 1994, she gave one of the most beloved performances of her life as the gentle, devoted mother of Forrest Gump. Each role reminded the world that Sally Field could bring warmth, depth, and quiet defiance to every character she touched. But every triumph carried its own invisible weight. Time after time, she had to battle against a Hollywood system that doubted women could carry complex, powerful roles once they reached a certain age. And yet, in every battle, she infused her characters with nuance, dignity, and truth. Her strength was not the kind that shouted, it was the kind that trembled but never broke. Even decades later, she was still defying expectations. In 2012, at the age of 66, she transformed herself into Mary Todd Lincoln in Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. To bring authenticity to the role, she gained weight, poured herself into historical research, and reached deep into the emotional heart of a woman who was both respected and misunderstood. The result was one of her most celebrated performances, earning her yet another Oscar nomination. But behind the accolades lay the toll. Each role demanded not just performance, but pieces of herself, emotional sacrifices, physical strain, and the constant burden of doubt. And still, she delivered. Again and again, Sally Field proved that artistry, forged in honesty, never grows old, and that the power of truth on screen is timeless. How many times did she suffer from heartbreak before she chose the safety of solitude over the risk of hoping again? Let's find out. The price of Hollywood romance. For Sally Field, love was never the soft, dreamlike fairy tale that movies and magazines promised. It was a harsh testing ground, filled with longing, betrayals, and the slow ache of promises that never fully came true. Her journey through romance stretched across 2 marriages and one of Hollywood's most famously stormy love stories. But it rarely felt like a romantic adventure, more like a long, exhausting test of endurance. Beneath the glimmer of Oscar nights and the cheers of adoring fans stood a woman repeatedly reaching for a love that could shelter her without wounding her. And time and again, she was left gathering the broken pieces of something she had hoped could save her. Those closest to her would later say that each heartbreak left her stronger, but also more cautious. Her heart remained open, yet it was guarded by scars she'd never wanted but had no choice but to carry. Her first marriage, to high school sweetheart Stephen Craig, seemed at the start like the safe harbor she had longed for. It was 1968. Sally was just 22, still glowing with youth and fresh from the chaos of early fame. She dreamed of a home, untouched by the whirlwind of studios, scripts, and public scrutiny. Together they imagined a life of quiet stability, a place where she could finally breathe. In the years that followed, they welcomed 2 sons, Peter in 1969 and Eli in 1972. Their laughter filled the house like sunlight, a joy so pure it became her guiding star. Yet even this happiness could not heal the silent cracks that grew between them. Craig's ambitions pulled him one way, while Sally, balancing sleepless nights of motherhood with the relentless grind of Hollywood, drifted in another. The distance didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly until it stretched like a cold, invisible river between them. Looking back, Sally would admit that even in the heart of her family life, she often felt unseen. In her memoir In Pieces, she wrote, "I played the role of the devoted wife, but I was disappearing in plain sight." Her supposed sanctuary had become a mirror of her isolation, her own dreams dissolving into a routine that served everyone else. By 1973, at only 27, the marriage had broken beyond repair. Their divorce, finalized in 1975, was private and sorrowful, a painful lesson that love does not always protect, and that loneliness can creep into even the homes we build ourselves. It was the first of many fractures in her life, but not the last. Then came Burt Reynolds, a man who would ignite in Sally a fierce mix of longing, admiration, and wounds that would take years to heal. It was 1977, and at 31, Sally was already a rising star, still carrying invisible scars from past battles, both personal and professional. They met on the set of Smokey and the Bandit, and just 4 days later, their spark exploded into something intense and consuming. The chemistry was instant, almost cinematic, crackling with laughter, desire, and the kind of passion that makes you believe in forever. To the public, they were Hollywood's golden couple, his rugged charm, her radiant warmth, walking red carpets like living movie stars. But behind the cameras, a different story unfolded, one of control, jealousy, and unspoken pain. Reynolds, at the height of his fame, had a swagger that could dominate a room, yet beneath it lay a deep insecurity that seeped into every corner of their relationship. He could be magnetic one moment and cutting the next, questioning her talent, undermining her ambitions, and trying to keep her brilliance in his shadow. When she was offered Norma Ray, a role that would define her career, he dismissed her outright, telling her she wasn't good enough, a verdict that haunted her even as she later held the Academy Award for the very performance he had doubted. In 1980, he refused to go with her to the Oscars, leaving her to face her triumph alone. The world saw her shining on stage, but no one saw the hollow ache in her chest as she walked off without the man she had hoped would be there. "I was always trying to prove I was enough for him," she later admitted, her voice a mix of steel and sorrow. In Pieces, she was even more blunt. "He made me feel small. He belittled me, controlled me, and I stayed, hoping I could make it right." Their love became a storm she could never escape. Brief moments of connection followed by sharp, wounding words. She clung to the hope that love could change what pain could not, only to learn that love cannot heal what someone refuses to face in themselves. Their final split in 1982 left no clean ending, just another deep scar in a life full of them. For nearly 30 years, Sally and Reynolds lived in complete silence. No phone calls, no letters, not even a chance meeting. Each year passed like a door clicking shut, closing slowly on the life they might have shared. And then, near the end of his life, Burt reached out. His voice was heavy with age and wear, carrying words she had once longed to hear. "You were the love of my life," but time had changed her heart. "It's too late," she wrote back. She had carried the weight of his love for so long that when he finally offered it freely, she had already set it down. She mourned him, not just the man, but the decades lost to pride, fear, and their unwillingness to meet each other halfway. For any woman who has heard too little, too late, Sally's story lands like a quiet thunder. It reminds us that timing can be love's cruelest enemy, and that sometimes survival means walking away from the very thing you once thought you could never live without. Did Sally give love another chance after the horrible experience? Let's find out. From heartbreak to self-preservation. In 1984, at 38, Sally decided to take another leap of faith. She married producer Alan Greisman, a man whose calm steadiness and respect for her work seemed to promise the peaceful life she had long sought. Their early years together felt different, less stormy, more grounded, as if life had finally handed her a safe harbor after decades of emotional tempests. 3 years later, in 1987, they welcomed her third son, Sam. His birth was a pure, radiant joy, a new anchor in the ever-shifting tides of her life. Decades later, when Sam came out as gay, it did not create distance between them. It drew them closer. For Sally, it deepened her understanding of unconditional love and strengthened her voice as a passionate advocate for LGBT+ rights. Reflecting on her marriage, she would tell interviewers, "I felt like I had finally found quiet waters." Yet even in those waters, the subtle currents of unmet needs and quiet dissatisfaction could not be ignored. It was never scandal or betrayal that ended their marriage, but the slow erosion of connection, the kind that lets two people share a home while living in separate emotional worlds. By 1994, at 48, Sally recognized the signs she had once overlooked in her youth. This time, she knew the difference between leaving in defeat and leaving to protect herself. She chose self-preservation. Their divorce marked not just the end of a marriage, but the start of a new chapter. One where she no longer stayed for appearances, fear of judgment, or the terror of being alone. "I've never been good at choosing a spouse," she joked in a 2024 interview, her humor a gentle mask over the quiet ache of memory. Behind the smile, however, was the truth of a woman who had survived love's sweetest illusions and its sharpest edges. Sally Field never stopped believing in love. She simply stopped losing herself in it. Today, in her late 70s, her life is full in ways that no romance ever could make it. Her home is a haven filled with laughter, alive with the presence of her 3 sons and 5 grandchildren. Mornings are spent nurturing her garden, afternoons devoted to writing, and evenings melting into the warmth of old films under the gentle glow of lamplight. There is no role to play, no expectations to meet, no compromises to silently endure, only Sally, complete, seasoned, and wise. Her journey through romance was never a tale of tragedy. It was a slow, twisting evolution. Every heartbreak etched a deeper understanding of her worth, and in the end, the most profound and daring love she discovered was the one she gave herself. How was Sally's early beginning? Let's take a closer look. Sally Field. Early life. The hardest parts of Sally Field's life didn't happen in front of cameras or on a movie set. They happened quietly, in a house in Pasadena, where silence didn't mean peace. It meant neglect. Sally was born on November 6, 1946, into a family that looked glamorous from the outside, but was filled with distance on the inside. Her mother, Margaret Field, was a busy actress working under Paramount Pictures. Her father, Richard Dryden Field, was a decorated World War II veteran, strict and often away. By 1950, when Sally was only 4 years old, her parents divorced. Instead of healing, her world became even more fragile. Her mother later married Jock Mahoney, a stuntman who charmed everyone in public but was a very different man behind closed doors. By the time Sally was 13, her stepfather had betrayed her trust in ways too painful for a child to put into words. In her 2018 memoir, In Pieces, she revealed that he crossed emotional and physical boundaries that left scars deeper than bruises. These were not accidents. They were violations of her safety, her spirit, and her sense of worth. But perhaps the deepest wound came not from him, but from her mother. Her mother never asked, never stopped it, never truly saw what was happening. Sally once described herself as a child, screaming on the inside, but no one was listening. That silence didn't just surround her life, it shaped it. Yet in that silence, she found a way to escape. Acting wasn't about fame or ambition. It was her survival. Watching her mother's film sets, she saw characters say things she herself could never say at home. At school, drama class became her refuge. Acting let her be someone else, someone who wasn't afraid. Acting let me be someone who didn't feel afraid, she later explained. Those early roles were not just practice, they were lifelines. In the early 1960s, at a high school party, a talent scout noticed her and invited her to audition at Columbia Studios. That chance wasn't just an opportunity. It was the first real glimpse of hope in her painful world. But her struggles didn't end there. At 17, in 1963, Sally became pregnant after a brief, confusing encounter at a graduation party. It wasn't love. It wasn't even closeness. It was pressure, silence, and shame, all over again. Instead of comfort or support, she was met with cold control. Her stepfather arranged for her to be sent to a clinic in Tijuana, Mexico. There were no kind words, no explanations, only a frightened girl in a foreign place. She woke up shaken and alone, her mother nowhere near her. That absence cut deeper than anything else. It wasn't just about a mistake. It was about being abandoned, treated as a problem to be hidden rather than as a daughter in need. But Sally didn't let that pain destroy her. Over the years, she transformed it. The silence that once suffocated her became the fuel for her voice. She rose not just as an actress, but as an advocate, speaking for women who had been silenced the way she once was. She fought for women's rights because she knew what it meant to suffer alone, and she swore no girl should have to live through what she did. Did suffering hinder Sally Field from achieving her goals? Or did she turn it into strength? Let's find out. Sally's journey to fame. Sally Field entered Hollywood with nothing polished, no powerful connections, no training that set her apart, just a stubborn will and a spark of raw talent that refused to be ignored. It was the mid-1960s, and Hollywood was a place that could turn a dream into gold one moment and crush it to dust the next. Into this unpredictable world, Sally Field stepped, determined to climb, even if the odds seemed stacked against her. In 1965, when she was only 19, she landed her very first big role, the boy-crazy surfer girl. The show was light, cheerful, and full of sunshine, and her performance won her fans by the thousands. Letters poured in. Her face became familiar, and she was celebrated as the sweet, smiling girl America wanted to adore. But behind that bright image was a quieter truth. Hollywood had already stamped her with a label: lightweight. The role paid her bills. It gave her laughter from strangers, but it starved the deeper hunger inside her, the hunger to be taken seriously. 2 years later, in 1967, she was cast in The Flying Nun, where she wore the wide-brimmed nun's habit that would make her a household name. Almost overnight, she became America's wholesome sweetheart. The public adored her. Producers saw her as the eternal girl next door, cheerful, uncomplicated, and safe. But to Sally, it felt like being trapped in a cage. Every compliment about her charm sounded like an insult to her depth, as if no one believed she had the strength to carry a serious story. Beneath the smiling surface, she was suffocating. So, at the very height of her television fame, she made a choice that few actors in her position would ever dare. She walked away. Between 1968 and 1971, she turned down every sitcom offer that came her way, choosing silence over selling a false version of herself. For nearly 3 years, she vanished from television screens and disappeared into the demanding world of Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio. There, under the unflinching discipline of method acting, she stripped away every layer of safety she had built. She faced the wounds she had buried since childhood, pouring unspoken grief and stubborn determination into each exercise, each movement, each line of dialogue. Hollywood insiders laughed at her absence. To them, she was just another starlet who had burned brightly for a moment and then faded into irrelevance. She admitted, years later, that the thought of quitting haunted her during those years. She would rather have served food in a diner than continue playing hollow, shallow roles that betrayed who she truly was. And then, in 1976, everything changed. That was the year Sybil arrived, a haunting psychological drama about a young woman torn apart by multiple personalities, each born from the scars of childhood trauma. Sally didn't just play the role. She became 13 different selves, each with its own voice, history, and fragile humanity. The performance was raw, unsettling, and unforgettable. Critics were stunned, audiences left, breathless. And for Sally it was a triumph that earned her the first Emmy Award of her career. In that moment, she silenced every doubt and shattered every box she had been placed in. She proved to the world and herself that true acting doesn't come from a pretty smile or easy charm. It comes from the deepest scars and the courage to show them. So, what do you think about Sally Field's heartbreaking journey? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.